What would you do if your closest work friend destroyed your career in 15 seconds? If someone you trusted with your deepest fears used them as weapons against you? This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a marketing coordinator who learned the hard way that in some workplaces, loyalty is just another word for weakness, and friendship, well, friendship can be the deadliest lie of all. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Morrison and Associates, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors of Chicago's most prestigious marketing firm. 26 floors above the bustling streets, Sarah Mitchell adjusted her blazer and took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of expensive coffee and quiet desperation that seemed to permeate every corner of the building. Sarah had been climbing these corporate stairs for 3 years now, each promotion feeling like a note in an unfinished symphony, building towards something beautiful yet always just out of reach. Her corner cubicle on the 18th floor had become her sanctuary, decorated with small potted plants that somehow managed to survive in the artificial light, their green leaves a reminder that life could flourish even in the most sterile environments. "Another early morning, huh?" The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, her cubicle neighbor and the closest thing she had to a friend in this glass tower of ambition. Marcus slid into his chair with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to navigate corporate waters without making waves. His dark eyes held a warmth that seemed genuine in a place where smiles were often calculated and handshakes came with hidden agendas. Sarah turned from her computer screen, where quarterly reports glowed like digital prayers for success. "You know how it is. The Peterson campaign needs to be perfect, or Jennifer will have my head on her desk by noon." Her laugh carried just a hint of the exhaustion that had been building in her chest like a discordant melody, growing louder each day. Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a secret shared between conspirators. "Between you and me, I heard something interesting yesterday. Jennifer's been in closed-door meetings with the executives all week. Word is, they're finally creating that creative director position we've all been hoping for." Sarah's heart performed a small pirouette in her chest, hope rising like the first notes of a long-awaited song. The creative director position had been whispered about for months, a mythical promotion that would mean not just more money, but creative control, respect, and finally, a chance to implement the innovative campaigns that kept her awake at night with excitement rather than anxiety. "Do you really think they'll post it internally first?" she asked, her fingers unconsciously tracing patterns on her desk that matched the rhythm of her suddenly racing pulse. "I hope so," Marcus replied, but something in his tone suggested layers beneath his words, like a melody with hidden harmonies that only revealed themselves upon closer listening. "You'd be perfect for it, Sarah. Your Peterson campaign alone shows more creativity than half the senior staff has produced in years." The compliment should have felt warm, should have settled in her chest like sunlight through stained glass. Instead, it left her with an odd sensation, as if Marcus were studying her reaction more carefully than a friend should. But she pushed the feeling aside, choosing instead to bask in the rare moment of encouragement in an environment where praise was rationed like wartime supplies. Jennifer Walsh, their department supervisor, emerged from the elevator like a storm system moving across the office landscape. Her heels clicked against the marble with the precision of a metronome, each step announcing her approach with military efficiency. Jennifer had mastered the art of looking perpetually disappointed, as if the very existence of her subordinates was a personal affront to her vision of professional excellence. "Sarah, Marcus, conference room 3. Now." Jennifer's voice cut through the office ambience like a conductor's baton demanding silence from an unruly orchestra. As they walked toward the conference room, Sarah caught her reflection in the polished glass walls that divided the office spaces. She looked professional, competent, ready. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun that had become her signature look, and her navy blazer projected the confidence she sometimes struggled to feel internally. But in her green eyes, she could see the spark of ambition that had carried her this far, The same spark that whispered promises of creative freedom and professional recognition. The conference room smelled of leather and the faint trace of expensive perfume from earlier meetings. Jennifer arranged her papers with the precision of a pianist preparing for a challenging piece, each document placed exactly where it needed to be for maximum impact. The Peterson campaign presentations are next week, Jennifer began, her words carrying the weight of an ultimatum disguised as information. As you know, this account represents $12 million in annual revenue for our firm. The client has specifically requested innovative approaches that will distinguish their brand in an oversaturated market. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, the familiar surge of creative energy that came whenever she was faced with a challenge that demanded her best work. This was why she had chosen marketing over the safer corporate paths her college friends had taken. This was the moment when art met commerce, when creativity could change not just campaigns but careers. I want both of your preliminary concepts on my desk by Friday, Jennifer continued, her gaze moving between Sarah and Marcus like a judge weighing evidence. The strongest concept will be presented to the Peterson team, and whoever creates it will receive full credit and recognition at the company-wide quarterly meeting. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge thrown down in an empty theater. Sarah felt the competitive energy shift in the room, a subtle change in atmospheric pressure that happened whenever individual ambition collided with collaborative relationships. She glanced at Marcus, searching his face for the familiar warmth of their morning conversations, but found instead something more focused, more calculating. Any questions? Jennifer's voice carried the finality of a symphony's last note. No questions, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the orchestra of possibilities playing in her mind. I'll have something remarkable ready for you. As they left the conference room, Marcus walked beside her with his usual easy stride, but Sarah noticed he didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he stared ahead at the maze of cubicles and corner offices that stretched before them like a battlefield dressed in corporate attire. May the best concept win, he said, finally turning toward her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sarah returned the smile, unaware that she was looking at the face of her closest ally transforming, note by note, into the architecture of her potential downfall. In the distance, the Chicago skyline stretched endlessly beyond the windows, a reminder that in this city of dreams and broken promises, success often came with a prize that wasn't listed in any employee handbook. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the first movement of Sarah's professional symphony was about to begin, though she couldn't yet hear the discordant notes that would soon threaten to drown out everything she had worked so hard to build. The Peterson campaign consumed Sarah's thoughts like a beautiful obsession, weaving itself through her dreams and following her home to her modest Lincoln Park apartment. She had transformed her living room into a creative war room, with mood boards covering every available wall surface and concept sketches scattered across her coffee table like fallen leaves from the tree of inspiration. It was Thursday evening, and Sarah sat cross-legged on her hardwood floor, surrounded by color swatches and brand analysis reports, when her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Working late again? Remember, all work and no play makes Sarah a very successful creative director. The message brought a smile to her tired face. Despite the competitive tension that had emerged since Jennifer's announcement, Marcus had maintained their friendship with the same easy warmth that had made him her anchor in the corporate storm. They still shared morning coffee conversations, still exchanged knowing glances during Jennifer's more dramatic presentations, still felt like allies in a world that often seemed designed to pit colleagues against each other. Sarah typed back, just putting the finishing touches on something that might change everything. How's your concept coming along? His response came quickly, struggling a bit, honestly. Mind if I come over? Maybe we can brainstorm together like the old days. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood at her apartment door holding 2 cups of coffee from the artisanal shop down the street, his expression carrying the familiar mix of exhaustion and determination that Sarah recognized from her own mirror. Her apartment welcomed him like an old friend, with its eclectic mix of vintage furniture and modern art prints, plants cascading from every available surface, and the soft jazz playing from her vintage record player. "Wow," Marcus said, surveying the creative chaos that had overtaken her living space. "This looks like the inside of a brilliant mind having a beautiful breakdown." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying genuine joy for the first time in days. "That's exactly what it is. But Marcus, I think I've found something special, something that could really set Peterson apart from everything else in their market." She led him to her main mood board, where dozens of images and concepts had been arranged with the precision of a symphonic score. The theme centered around authentic human connections in an increasingly digital world, with Peterson's product positioned not just as a service, but as a bridge between technology and genuine human experience. "The tagline is 'Where innovation meets soul,'" Sarah explained, her voice carrying the passion that made her green eyes light up like stage lights illuminating a performer's best moment. "Instead of focusing on features and benefits like every other tech campaign, we're selling the emotional experience. We're telling people that in a world of artificial everything, Peterson offers something real." Marcus studied the board with intense focus, his dark eyes moving across each element with the attention of someone committing details to memory. Sarah watched his face, searching for the spark of recognition she hoped to see, the acknowledgement that she had created something worthy of the creative director position they both wanted. It's really innovative," Marcus said slowly, his voice carrying notes that Sarah couldn't quite identify. "The emotional angle is brilliant. I never would have thought to approach it from that direction." "What's your concept focusing on?" Sarah asked, settling onto her couch with her legs tucked beneath her, feeling generous in her excitement and wanting to share the creative energy that was flowing through her like electricity. Marcus sat beside her, suddenly looking older than his 28 years. "Honestly, I've been going in circles all week. Everything I come up with feels derivative, like I'm just reshuffling the same tired ideas that have been used 1,000 times before." He paused, running his hand through his black hair in a gesture Sarah had learned meant he was wrestling with something difficult. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Sarah replied, though something in his tone made her lean back slightly, as if her instincts were picking up frequencies her conscious mind hadn't yet identified. "Do you ever feel like we're all just pretending? Like this whole corporate world is just an elaborate performance where everyone knows their lines except us?" Marcus's question hung in the air between them like a confession whispered in an empty church. Sarah considered his words, feeling the weight of truth in them. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but then I create something like this, something that feels authentic and meaningful, and I remember why I chose this path. It's not about the corporate games. It's about the possibility of creating something that matters, something that connects with people on a level deeper than just selling products." Marcus nodded, but his expression seemed distant, as if he were listening to music she couldn't hear. "You're remarkable. You know that. The way you maintain that idealism in a place like Morrison and Associates. It's inspiring." The compliment should have felt wonderful, but instead, it settled in Sarah's chest with an odd weight, like a beautiful song played in a minor key when you were expecting major. She studied Marcus's face, searching for the source of her unease, but found only the familiar features of her friend and confidant. "Marcus, is everything okay? You seem different tonight." He turned toward her then, and for a moment, his expression was so intense, so filled with something that looked almost like hunger, that Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. But then, like clouds passing over the sun, his features softened back into the warmth she knew. "Just tired, I guess. This whole competition thing has me more stressed than I expected." He stood up, moving toward her mood board again. "Do you mind if I take some photos? For inspiration, not copying," he added quickly. "Sometimes seeing how other creative minds work helps me break through my own blocks." Sarah hesitated for just a moment, that strange instinct whispering warnings she couldn't quite understand. But this was Marcus, her friend, her ally in the corporate wilderness. If she couldn't trust him, who could she trust? Of course, she said, reaching for her phone. Actually, let me send you some of the research documents too. Maybe they'll spark something for your own concept. As Marcus photographed her work, Sarah felt a strange sense of completion, as if she were a musician sharing her compositions with a fellow artist. She didn't notice the way his eyes lingered on her tagline, or how carefully he documented not just her visual concepts but her strategic reasoning written in the margins of her sketches. When he left an hour later, Sarah felt oddly drained, as if the evening had taken more energy than she had anticipated. She stood in her living room, looking at the creative chaos that surrounded her, and for the first time since she had begun working on the Peterson campaign, doubt crept into her thoughts like discordant notes in an otherwise perfect melody. Outside her window, Chicago glittered with the promise of dreams fulfilled and ambitions realized. But in the reflection of the glass, Sarah saw herself surrounded by her work and couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the evening symphony, some crucial harmony that had been altered in ways she couldn't yet identify. The next morning would bring Jennifer's deadline, and with it, the revelation that would transform Sarah's understanding of friendship, loyalty, and the true cost of ambition in the serpent's garden of corporate success. But tonight, she allowed herself to believe that trust was still possible, that friendship could survive competition, and that the best ideas would rise to the surface like cream, regardless of the games being played in the shadows. She had no way of knowing that her own generosity had just provided the weapon that would be used to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Chicago feel like a city where anything was possible, where dreams could crystallize like frost on windows and ambitions could be realized with the simple act of walking through the right door at the right moment. Sarah entered Morrison & Associates with her presentation materials clutched in her leather portfolio, her heart performing a steady rhythm of excitement and nervous energy. She had spent the previous evening refining her Peterson campaign to perfection, each element polished until it gleamed like a precious instrument ready for its debut performance. The Where Innovation Meets Soul concept felt like the culmination of everything she had learned about marketing, about human psychology, about the delicate art of making corporate messages feel authentically human. Marcus was already at his desk when she arrived, his head bent over his laptop with the focused intensity of someone putting final touches on something important. He looked up as she passed, offering her a smile that seemed to carry the weight of shared secrets and mutual support. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, his voice carrying what sounded like genuine encouragement. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah replied, settling into her cubicle and immediately beginning the ritual of preparing her presentation materials. "How did your concept turn out? Did you manage to break through that creative block?" "Yeah, actually," Marcus said, his tone suggesting surprise at his own success. "Sometimes inspiration strikes when you least expect it. I think I might have something Jennifer will find interesting." Something in his phrasing made Sarah glance up from her papers, but Marcus had already returned his attention to his laptop screen, his fingers moving across the keyboard with rapid precision. She pushed aside the odd sensation that had flickered through her consciousness and focused instead on her own materials, double-checking that every detail was exactly as it should be. Jennifer's office sat at the corner of the 18th floor like a fortress of professional authority, its glass walls offering panoramic views of Chicago's skyline while maintaining the transparency that allowed her to survey her domain with the vigilance of a conductor watching every section of her orchestra. Sarah knocked on the doorframe at exactly 10 o'clock, her presentation materials organized with the precision of sheet music arranged for a world-class performance. "Come in, Sarah," Jennifer called, her voice carrying the neutral tone that revealed nothing about her expectations or mood. "I trust you have something impressive to show me." Sarah entered the office and immediately felt the familiar mixture of intimidation and inspiration that Jennifer's presence always evoked. The space was decorated with awards from successful campaigns, photographs from industry conferences, and the subtle markers of someone who had climbed the corporate ladder with determination and strategic intelligence. I believe I do, Sarah replied, settling into the chair across from Jennifer's mahogany desk. The Peterson campaign I've developed takes a completely different approach from anything currently in their market sector. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah presented her where innovation meets soul concept with the passion of a musician debuting a composition that had consumed her thoughts and dreams. She explained the strategic reasoning, demonstrated the visual elements, and outlined an implementation plan that would position Peterson as not just another tech company, but as a bridge between innovation and authentic human experience. Jennifer listened with the intense focus of someone evaluating not just a campaign, but the creative potential of the person presenting it. Her questions were sharp, probing, designed to test both the strength of the concept and Sarah's ability to defend and refine her vision under pressure. Interesting approach, Jennifer said when Sarah finished, her tone giving away nothing about her assessment. The emotional angle is certainly unexpected. I'll need to review all the materials before making my decision, of course, Sarah replied, gathering her materials with hands that trembled slightly from the adrenaline of performance. Thank you for your time and consideration. As she left Jennifer's office, Sarah felt the mixture of relief and anticipation that followed any high-stakes presentation. She had given her best performance, laid her creative soul bare, and now could only wait for the verdict that would determine not just a Peterson campaign, but potentially the trajectory of her entire career. Marcus was waiting by her cubicle when she returned, his expression carrying what looked like supportive curiosity mixed with his own pre-presentation nerves. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice carrying the tone of someone genuinely concerned about a friend's success. "I think it went well," Sarah replied, settling into her chair with the exhaustion that followed intense creative effort. Jennifer didn't give much away, but she seemed engaged with the concept. "How are you feeling about your presentation?" "Nervous," Marcus admitted, running his hand through his hair in the gesture she had learned to associate with his moments of vulnerability. "I just hope I can present half as effectively as you probably did." The compliment felt warm and genuine, and Sarah found herself smiling with the first real relaxation she had felt all morning. "You'll do great, Marcus. Your creative instincts are fantastic when you trust them." At 11:30, Marcus disappeared into Jennifer's office, carrying his own presentation materials with the careful attention of someone handling something precious and fragile. Sarah watched him through the glass walls, noting the confident way he moved, the animated gestures he used while presenting, the focused attention Jennifer gave his materials. The presentation lasted nearly 30 minutes, longer than Sarah's had taken, which could mean either that Jennifer was more engaged with Marcus's concept or that she was raising more challenging questions. Sarah tried to focus on her regular work, but found herself glancing toward Jennifer's office with the anxious attention of someone waiting for news that could change everything. When Marcus finally emerged, his expression was impossible to read, carrying neither the triumph of certain success nor the disappointment of obvious failure. He returned to his cubicle without making eye contact with Sarah, immediately becoming absorbed in his computer screen with an intensity that seemed designed to discourage conversation. "How did it go?" Sarah asked anyway, her concern for her friend overriding her respect for his apparent desire for privacy. "Hard to tell," Marcus replied without looking up from his screen. "Jennifer's impossible to read, you know. I guess we'll both find out together." The afternoon stretched endlessly, filled with routine tasks that felt meaningless in the shadow of the decision that would determine their futures. Sarah found herself checking her email compulsively, jumping slightly every time Jennifer's office door opened, listening for any hint of the verdict that would crown either her innovation or Marcus's creativity as the key to the Peterson account. At 4 o'clock, Jennifer's assistant sent an email that made Sarah's heart perform a complex rhythm of hope and terror. "All staff meeting, conference room A, 4:30 p.m. Peterson campaign decision announcement." The conference room filled with the entire marketing department, creating an atmosphere of collective anticipation that felt like an audience gathering for a performance where no one knew whether they were about to witness triumph or tragedy. Sarah sat in her usual spot, with Marcus beside her, both of them maintaining the professional composure that masked their internal orchestras of hope and anxiety. Jennifer entered the room with the dramatic timing of someone who understood the power of anticipation, carrying a folder that contained the decision that would change someone's life. Her expression was as neutral as always, revealing nothing about the contents of her announcement. "The Peterson campaign represents a significant opportunity for our firm," Jennifer began, her voice carrying the authority of someone delivering news that would reshape the professional landscape of everyone present. "After careful consideration of both presentations, I've selected the concept that best embodies innovation, creativity, and market potential." Sarah felt her pulse quicken, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she prepared to hear either her vindication or her disappointment. Beside her, Marcus sat with similar tension, his usual easy demeanor replaced by the focused attention of someone awaiting a verdict. The winning concept approaches Peterson's brand positioning through an emotional lens, recognizing that in today's market, consumers respond to authentic connection rather than simply product features. Jennifer paused, her gaze moving across the assembled staff like a spotlight searching for its target. The tagline, "Where innovation meets soul," captures exactly the kind of market differentiation Peterson needs to stand apart from their competitors. Sarah's heart leaped with recognition, joy flooding through her system like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She had won. Her concept, her creativity, her vision had been chosen for the campaign that could transform her career. But then Jennifer's next words fell like a discordant note that shattered the symphony of Sarah's triumph. "Congratulations, Marcus, on a truly innovative campaign concept. You'll be presenting to the Peterson team next week, and I'm recommending you for immediate consideration for our new creative director position." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, confusion and disbelief crashing over her in waves that made it difficult to breathe. She turned toward Marcus, searching his face for the surprise she expected to see, the confusion that should mirror her own. Instead, she found something that made her blood turn to ice water in her veins. Marcus was smiling, but not with the shock of unexpected victory. His expression carried the satisfaction of someone whose carefully laid plans had come to perfect fruition. The realization struck her like lightning, illuminating a landscape she had never seen before. Her concept, her tagline, her innovative approach, everything she had shared with Marcus and the trust of friendship had been stolen, repackaged, and presented as his own creation. As the meeting dissolved into congratulations and discussions of next steps, Sarah sat frozen in her chair, watching her former friend, accept praise for work that had originated from her late nights, her creative passion, her generous willingness to share inspiration with someone she trusted. Marcus finally turned toward her, his expression now carrying something that looked almost like pity mixed with triumph. "Sarah, I don't," she whispered, her voice carrying a finality that cut through his attempted explanation like a blade through silk. "Just don't." She stood up on legs that felt unsteady, gathered what remained of her professional dignity, and walked out of the conference room with the careful precision of someone who refused to let others see her breaking apart. Behind her, she could hear the continued sounds of celebration, the voices of colleagues congratulating the thief who had stolen not just her work, but her trust in the possibility that friendship could survive in the serpent's garden of corporate ambition. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt like descending into an underworld where everything she had believed about loyalty, friendship, and fairness had been revealed as beautiful illusions that couldn't survive contact with reality. As she sat in her car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, Sarah realized that the symphony of her professional life had just experienced a movement she had never expected, the movement where the melody she had been playing was revealed to be someone else's song, performed by someone wearing the mask of friendship while wielding the knife of betrayal. The worst part wasn't just that Marcus had stolen her work. The worst part was that she had handed him the weapon, wrapped in the ribbon of trust, and watched him use it to destroy everything she had built. The Judas kiss had been delivered not with silver coins, but with coffee cups and supportive smiles and the promise of friendship in a world where friendship, apparently, was just another commodity to be bought and sold for the price of a promotion. The weekend passed like a fever dream of rage and disbelief. Sarah's Lincoln Park apartment transforming from a creative sanctuary into a war room where she planned her response to the betrayal that had shattered her professional world like glass hitting concrete. She had barely slept, barely eaten, sustained only by the burning fuel of injustice and the desperate need to reclaim what had been stolen from her. Monday morning arrived gray and threatening, Chicago's skyline shrouded in clouds that matched Sarah's mood as she entered Morrison and Associates with the grim determination of someone preparing for battle. She had spent the weekend gathering evidence, emails, drafts, timestamps on documents, anything that could prove the Peterson campaign concept had originated from her creativity, not Marcus's theft. Marcus was already at his desk, looking every inch the conquering hero in his new role as the firm's golden boy. His cubicle had been upgraded with flowers from well-wishers, his computer screen displayed what looked like implementation plans for his Peterson campaign, and his entire demeanor radiated the confidence of someone who believed he had gotten away with the perfect crime. "Sarah," he said as she passed, his voice carrying a tone that attempted warmth but landed somewhere closer to condescension. "I was hoping we could talk." "I'm sure you were," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the cutting edge of someone who had spent 2 days transforming pain into precision. "But I'm busy preparing materials for Jennifer. It seems there's been some confusion about the Peterson campaign's actual origins." Something flickered across Marcus's face, surprise, perhaps, or concern that his carefully constructed narrative might be challenged. But he recovered quickly, his expression settling back into the practiced sincerity that Sarah now recognized as his most dangerous weapon. "Sarah, I understand you're upset." But upset? The word erupted from her with the force of a soprano hitting a high note after building through an entire aria of suppressed emotion. "Upset doesn't begin to cover what I am, Marcus. Betrayed, stolen from, lied to, those might be starting points." Several nearby colleagues had begun to notice the exchange, their attention drawn by the unusual sight of Sarah's controlled professional demeanor cracking to reveal the fury beneath. Marcus glanced around nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of their confrontation. "Maybe we should discuss this privately," he suggested, his voice dropping to a whisper that Sarah found more insulting than his theft. "Privacy is what got us here in the first place," Sarah replied, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure their conversation was no longer confined to their immediate workspace. "Privacy was what I offered you when I shared my work, my research, my creative process. Privacy was the cover you used to steal everything I had developed." "I didn't steal anything," Marcus said, his voice gaining a defensive edge that revealed cracks in his composed facade. "Creative collaboration is part of this industry. Ideas build on other ideas. That's how innovation works." The audacity of his response hit Sarah like a physical blow, the casual way he dismissed her accusation while simultaneously rewriting the narrative of what had transpired. She realized she was looking at someone who had not only betrayed her trust but had convinced himself that his betrayal was justified, perhaps even admirable. "Creative collaboration?" Sarah's voice carried the dangerous quiet that preceded storms. "Is that what we're calling theft now? Because I have emails, Marcus. I have drafts with timestamps. I have evidence of every conversation we had, every moment of trust I showed you, every piece of my creative process that you documented and then claimed as your own." For the first time since the announcement on Friday, Marcus's confident facade showed genuine cracks. His dark eyes darted toward Jennifer's office, then back to Sarah, as if calculating whether damage control was still possible or if his carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. "You're being dramatic," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Even if we shared some ideas, the final presentation was my own work, my own synthesis. Your synthesis of my concept, my tagline, my strategic approach, and my market analysis." Sarah's voice was gaining strength, fed by the righteous anger that came from finally speaking truth after days of swallowing lies. "Tell me, Marcus, What exactly in that presentation originated from your own creative mind? The question hung in the air between them like an accusation written in fire, and Marcus's inability to provide an immediate answer told Sarah everything she needed to know about the depth of his theft. Around them, the office atmosphere had shifted, colleagues pretending to work while clearly listening to the confrontation that was finally bringing the Peterson campaign controversy into the light. Sarah, Marcus, my office. Now, Jennifer's voice cut through the tension like a conductor's baton demanding immediate attention from an orchestra that had begun playing in different keys. The walk to Jennifer's office felt like a march toward judgment, each step carrying the weight of evidence Sarah had prepared and the accusations she was finally ready to make. Marcus walked beside her with the tense posture of someone who knew his carefully constructed narrative was about to face its most serious challenge. Jennifer's office felt different this morning, less like a sanctuary of professional authority and more like a courtroom where truth and lies would finally be separated like wheat from chaff. Jennifer sat behind her mahogany desk with the focused attention of someone who understood that the conversation about to unfold would determine not just the fate of the Peterson campaign, but the integrity of her department's creative processes. I've heard raised voices, Jennifer began, her tone carrying the neutral authority of someone determined to get to the bottom of a situation that threatened the professional harmony of her workplace. And I've received some concerning emails from Sarah over the weekend. I think it's time we addressed whatever issues have arisen regarding the Peterson campaign. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of evidence in her hands and the burning need for justice in her chest. This was her moment to reclaim not just her work, but her professional integrity and her faith in the possibility that truth could still matter in a world of corporate politics and personal ambition. Jennifer, I need to show you something that will prove the Peterson campaign concept was stolen from my original work. Sarah opened her laptop, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the precision of a pianist about to perform the most important piece of her career. I have documentation that will show exactly how my trusted colleague used our friendship to gain access to my creative process, then presented my work as his own. Marcus shifted in his chair, his earlier confidence now completely replaced by the nervous energy of someone watching his carefully constructed lies begin to unravel thread by thread. These are serious accusations, Sarah, Jennifer said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood that the next few minutes would determine careers, reputations, and the very foundation of trust within her department. They're serious because what happened was serious, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the emotional orchestra playing forte in her chest. And I intend to prove every single word. As Sarah began to present her evidence, she felt the familiar surge of creative energy that came with building a compelling narrative. But this wasn't about selling a product or creating a campaign. This was about reclaiming her voice, her work, and her faith that in a world where betrayal were the mask of friendship, truth could still rise above the symphony of lies that had nearly destroyed everything she had worked so hard to build. The reckoning had finally begun, and Sarah intended to play every note with the precision and passion that had made her original Peterson campaign worthy of theft in the first place. Justice, she realized, was just another form of creative expression, and she had never been more inspired in her life. The evidence unfolded across Jennifer's desk like musical score revealing its secrets one measure at a time, each document and email timestamp building toward a crescendo of undeniable truth. Sarah's hands moved with surgical precision as she laid out the proof of Marcus's betrayal, her voice steady and professional despite the emotional hurricane that had been building in her chest for 3 days. This is the original concept document, Sarah began, opening a file dated 2 weeks earlier. As you can see, the Where Innovation Meets Soul tagline appears here, along with the complete strategic framework that was presented as Marcus's work on Friday. Jennifer leaned forward, her reading glasses reflecting the computer screen's glow as she examined the timestamp and document properties with the focus of a detective analyzing crucial evidence. Her expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see the wheels turning behind her professional facade as she began to recognize the implications of what was being revealed. And here, Sarah continued, opening a series of emails, are the exchanges where Marcus specifically asked for access to my research materials. He claimed he was struggling with his own concept and needed inspiration to break through his creative block. Marcus had remained silent during the first part of Sarah's presentation, his earlier defensiveness replaced by something that looked almost like resignation. But as the full scope of the evidence became clear, he finally found his voice. Jennifer, this is all being taken out of context, he said, his words carrying the desperate edge of someone watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse in real time. Sarah and I collaborated on ideas. That's normal in a creative environment. The fact that we discuss concepts doesn't mean collaborated. Sarah's voice cut through his explanation like a blade through silk. Let me show you what collaboration actually looks like versus what theft looks like. She opened her photo gallery, revealing the images Marcus had taken of her mood boards during his visit to her apartment. The metadata showed they were captured on Thursday evening, less than 12 hours before his supposedly original presentation to Jennifer. Marcus took these photos of my complete creative framework on Thursday night, Sarah explained, her voice gaining strength from the irrefutable nature of her evidence. Every visual element, every strategic note, every piece of research that formed the foundation of his presentation was documented by his own camera in my apartment. Jennifer's expression had shifted from neutral evaluation to something approaching shock as the full scope of the deception became clear. She looked at Marcus with the disappointed gaze of someone who had believed in a person's integrity only to discover it had been an elaborate performance. Marcus, Jennifer said, her voice carrying the weight of someone delivering a verdict that would reshape the professional landscape of her department. I need you to explain how your presentation contained elements that are identical to work Sarah had already completed and documented. Marcus shifted in his chair, his confident demeanor completely evaporated, replaced by the desperate energy of someone trying to construct a defense from the wreckage of exposed lies. We discussed these concepts extensively. When creative minds work together, sometimes it's difficult to separate where one person's ideas end and another's begin. Difficult to separate? Sarah's voice rose with the indignation of someone who had been pushed beyond the limits of professional restraint. Marcus, you literally photographed my work and presented it as your own creation. There's no gray area here. There's no collaboration. There's theft, pure and simple. Jennifer held up a hand, her gesture requesting silence as she continued to examine the evidence spread across her desk. The office felt charged with the tension of a courtroom where truth and lies were being weighed on scales that would determine the fate of everyone present. Sarah, can you walk me through the timeline of your creative process? Jennifer asked, her voice carrying the methodical tone of someone determined to establish facts beyond any reasonable doubt. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah presented a chronological account of her Peterson campaign development, supported by drafts, research notes, and documented creative evolution that painted a clear picture of original work being systematically stolen. Each piece of evidence built upon the previous one, creating an unassailable fortress of truth that left no room for Marcus's explanations. The most damning evidence, Sarah continued, her voice gaining the confident rhythm of someone who knew they held winning cards, is this text conversation from Thursday night, after Marcus left my apartment. She displayed her phone screen, revealing Marcus's message. Thanks for sharing your work tonight. Sometimes inspiration strikes when you least expect it. The words hung in the air like a confession written in digital ink, their implications so clear that even Marcus couldn't attempt to explain them away. Jennifer read the message twice, her expression evolving from professional skepticism to outright dismay as she realized the depth of the betrayal that had occurred within her department. Marcus, Jennifer said, her voice carrying the finality of someone who had heard enough evidence to render judgment. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Any explanation for how your presentation happened to contain work that Sarah had already created and shared with you in confidence? Marcus looked between Jennifer and Sarah, his face cycling through expressions of desperation, anger, and finally, something that might have been regret. When he spoke, His voice carried the defeated tone of someone whose carefully constructed lies had finally collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. I knew my own concept wasn't strong enough, he admitted, his words coming out in a rush as if confession might somehow reduce the severity of his situation. I was facing a deadline, and I knew Sarah's work was brilliant. I thought I could build on it, make it my own, transform it into something that would advance both of our careers. Both of our careers? Sarah's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who had been offered an insult disguised as justification. How exactly would stealing my work advance my career, Marcus? How would watching you receive credit and promotion for my creativity benefit me in any way? I thought if I got the creative director position, I could bring you up with me, Marcus said, his explanation sounding hollow even to himself. I thought we could work together. As partners. Partners? Sarah stood up, her emotional control finally giving way to the fury that had been building like pressure in a steam engine. Partners don't steal from each other, Marcus. Partners don't lie to each other's faces while plotting betrayal. Partners don't build their success on the creative destruction of people who trusted them. Jennifer had been taking notes throughout the exchange, her pen moving across paper with the precision of someone documenting events that would have serious professional consequences. When she looked up, her expression carried the weight of someone who had witnessed a fundamental breach of professional ethics. Marcus, I'm suspending you pending a full investigation into this matter, Jennifer announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone delivering a verdict that brooked no appeal. The Peterson campaign will be returned to Sarah's control, and I'm recommending her for immediate consideration for the creative director position. The words should have felt like vindication, like justice finally being served after days of watching lies triumph over truth. But Sarah found that victory tasted different than she had expected, not sweet, but bitter, seasoned with the disappointment of discovering that someone she had trusted was capable of such calculated betrayal. Marcus stood up slowly, his movements carrying the defeated posture of someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed around him. He looked at Sarah with an expression that might have been remorse, but she found she no longer cared enough to analyze the authenticity of his emotions. Sarah, he began, but she held up her hand, stopping his words before they could pollute the air with more lies disguised as apologies. You made your choice, Marcus, she said, her voice carrying the finality of someone who had closed a door that would never be opened again. You chose betrayal over friendship, theft over creativity, lies over loyalty. You don't get to apologize your way out of the consequences. As Marcus gathered his personal belongings and left Jennifer's office under the curious stares of their colleagues, Sarah felt something shift in her understanding of the corporate world she had been navigating for 3 years. The victory was hers, the creative director position was within reach, and her original work would finally receive the recognition it deserved. But the cost had been the destruction of her faith in workplace friendships, her belief that trust could exist in environments driven by ambition, and her innocence about the lengths to which people would go to advance their careers. The truth symphony had reached its crescendo, but the melody that emerged was more complex than simple triumph. It was the bittersweet music of justice served at the expense of everything she had believed about human decency. The stage was set for the final movement of Sarah's professional transformation, where victory and disillusionment would dance together in a performance that would reshape not just her career, but her understanding of what it meant to succeed in a world where friendship could be weaponized and trust could be the most dangerous gift of all. 6 months later, Sarah sat in her new corner office on the 22nd floor of Morrison & Associates, the Chicago skyline stretching endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows that framed her view like a living artwork celebrating the triumph of persistence over betrayal. The nameplate on her mahogany desk read Sarah Mitchell, Creative Director, but the title felt less like a destination and more like a waypoint on a journey that had fundamentally changed her understanding of success, trust, and the price of professional ambition. The Peterson campaign had launched to unprecedented success, earning industry recognition and generating the kind of results that transformed marketing executives into legends. Sarah's "where innovation meets soul" concept had resonated with consumers in ways that exceeded even her most optimistic projections, proving that authentic emotional connection could indeed differentiate brands in an oversaturated marketplace. Her office reflected the creative vision that had earned her this position. Plants cascaded from floating shelves, original artwork from local Chicago artists decorated the walls, and a vintage record player in the corner provided the soundtrack for late-night strategy sessions. But the space also carried subtle reminders of the lessons she had learned about the serpentine nature of corporate relationships. A soft knock interrupted her review of quarterly reports, and Sarah looked up to see Jennifer standing in her doorway with the expression of someone carrying news that required delicate handling. "Do you have a few minutes?" Jennifer asked, her tone suggesting the conversation ahead would be more significant than routine business updates. "Of course," Sarah replied, gesturing toward the comfortable seating area she had installed for more relaxed discussions. "What's on your mind?" Jennifer settled into one of the leather chairs with the careful attention of someone choosing words that would need to be precisely calibrated. "I wanted to update you on the Marcus situation and to discuss an opportunity that's emerged from some unexpected quarters." Sarah felt her stomach tighten slightly at the mention of Marcus's name, though 6 months had dulled the sharp edges of anger and betrayal into something more manageable, a distant ache rather than an immediate wound. She had heard through office gossip that he had been terminated and was struggling to find new employment in Chicago's competitive marketing landscape, his reputation damaged by the circumstances of his departure. "I'm listening," Sarah said, her voice carrying the professional neutrality she had learned to employ when discussing painful subjects. "First, the investigation confirmed everything you presented," Jennifer continued. "Marcus admitted to the full scope of his actions, including the systematic theft of your creative work and the deliberate deception involved in presenting it as his own. He's been blacklisted from the industry association, and his termination letter includes details that will make it very difficult for him to find similar employment elsewhere." Sarah nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy at this confirmation of Marcus's professional destruction. Justice had been served, but she had learned that justice often felt more like closure than celebration. "But more importantly," Jennifer continued, her tone shifting to something approaching excitement, "the success of the Peterson campaign has attracted attention from some very impressive quarters. I've received a call from Harrison and Associates in New York. They're looking for a creative director to head their new West Coast expansion, and they specifically requested to speak with you." The words hit Sarah like a symphony's opening notes, carrying possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine 6 months earlier. Harrison and Associates was legendary in the marketing world, the kind of firm where careers weren't just built but crafted into works of art that influenced entire industries. "They're offering a position that would essentially let you build a creative department from the ground up," Jennifer explained, her voice carrying genuine enthusiasm for Sarah's opportunity. "Complete creative control, unlimited budget for talent acquisition, and the chance to define the creative standards for one of the most respected firms in the country." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The familiar surge of excitement that came whenever she encountered possibilities that could transform not just her career but her entire professional identity. This was the kind of opportunity that emerged perhaps once in a lifetime, the chance to create something magnificent from nothing. "It would mean leaving Chicago," Jennifer continued. "Leaving Morrison and Associates, leaving the position you've worked so hard to achieve here." "But Sarah, this is the kind of offer that could establish you as one of the most influential creative directors in the industry." The decision should have been immediate, obvious, the clear choice of someone whose ambition had finally aligned with unprecedented opportunity. But Sarah found herself hesitating, not from fear of change, but from a deeper understanding of what success truly meant and what prices she was willing to pay for professional advancement. "Jennifer, can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said, her voice carrying the tone of someone seeking wisdom rather than simply information. "Of course. In your experience, Is it possible to achieve significant success in this industry while maintaining genuine relationships? While preserving the parts of yourself that aren't driven by ambition and competition? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful as she considered the weight of the question. When she spoke, her voice carried the wisdom of someone who had navigated corporate waters for decades and understood their hidden currents. The Marcus situation taught us both something important, Jennifer said finally. It's not that friendship and success are incompatible. It's that we have to be very careful about who we trust with our vulnerability. Success doesn't corrupt people, it reveals who they really were all along. Sarah absorbed these words, feeling their truth settle in her chest like a melody that finally resolved to its intended key. The betrayal had been devastating not because it ended her friendship with Marcus, but because it revealed that the friendship had never really existed in the first place. The people worth maintaining relationships with, Jennifer continued, are the ones who celebrate your success genuinely, who compete with honor, who understand that there's enough success in this world for everyone to thrive without destroying each other. Over the following week, Sarah interviewed with Harrison and Associates via video conference, experiencing the heady excitement of being courted by creative legends who spoke her professional language with fluency and respect. They offered her everything she had ever dreamed of: creative freedom, unlimited resources, the chance to build something transformative from the foundation up. But as she walked through Lincoln Park on a crisp autumn evening, considering the decision that would determine the next chapter of her professional life, Sarah realized that her understanding of success had evolved beyond simple career advancement. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had also freed her from naive beliefs about workplace relationships, allowing her to rebuild her professional identity on a foundation of wisdom rather than trust. She accepted the Harrison and Associates position with the confidence of someone who had been tested by betrayal and emerged stronger, more focused, and infinitely more strategic about the relationships she chose to cultivate. The creative director position at Morrison and Associates had been her vindication. The move to Harrison and Associates would be her transformation into the kind of industry leader she had always had the potential to become. On her last day at Morrison and Associates, Sarah stood in her corner office, looking out at the Chicago skyline that had witnessed her journey from naive optimism through betrayal to hard-won wisdom. Her new colleagues had sent flowers, her former teammates had planned a farewell dinner, and Jennifer had written a recommendation letter that read like a love song to professional excellence. As she packed the last of her personal belongings, Sarah found herself thinking not about Marcus and his betrayal, but about the strength she had discovered in herself when everything she believed about loyalty and friendship had been shattered. The phoenix metaphor wasn't just poetic imagery, it was the lived experience of someone who had allowed herself to burn in the fire of betrayal and had emerged with wings strong enough to carry her to heights she had never imagined possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from her new team leader in Los Angeles. "Welcome to the family, Sarah. We can't wait to see what you create." Sarah smiled, slipping her phone into her purse and taking one last look at the city that had taught her that success without wisdom was hollow, but wisdom earned through adversity was the foundation upon which legendary careers were built. The elevator carried her down through the floors of Morrison and Associates for the final time, but Sarah felt herself rising, lifted by the knowledge that she had faced the worst that corporate betrayal could offer and had transformed it into the stepping stone toward everything she had ever wanted to achieve. The symphony of her professional life was entering a new movement, one where she would conduct rather than simply perform, where she would create rather than simply survive, and where she would build relationships based on earned trust rather than generous naivety. The phoenix had risen, and the sky held no limits for how high she could soar. If this story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph resonated with you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that explore the complex world of corporate ambition, workplace relationships, and the price of success. Hit that notification bell to be the first to hear stories of people who faced impossible odds and discovered strength they never knew they possessed. Your like and share help us bring these important stories to others who might be facing their own workplace challenges. Remember, sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding betrayal, but from surviving it and becoming stronger on the other side.